Hi everyone, my name is Suma and this is Rahul Singh. He has a YouTube channel where he explores the philosophy of Advaita Vedanta or non-duality in a very simple and practical way. Welcome Rahul, and thank you so much for your patience because I know this has been a long overdue. I really appreciate your patience that we finally made this happen.
Yeah, it's been some time since we've been in communication, and actually before we kind of get started here, I just want to say I love your interviewing style. I think one day I wish I can ask people the questions like you ask, because it's always in depth, to the point, and it gets someone to think deeper, and I really like that. So when I first saw your channel, I was like, "Ah, this is the person where I can really explore my ideas properly."
Thank you so much. And I get a same sense when I watch your content. It seems very spontaneous, and you're not explored to go to these areas where a lot of people don't tend to go. So it's been interesting to watch your explorations over last 1 year.
Oh, thank you, thank you. Yeah, a lot has changed, like in the since we first started communicating, right? I feel like there has been an evolution of some sort.
Yeah, when I was reading your bio, it seems like you started over 20 years ago, these explorations. Um,
Yes.
I would love to know like what inspired you to explore these topics and how it has evolved, because 20 years is a long time. So has anything changed for you over 20 years where now when you look back, like some of the things you thought when you began, it's like completely like you didn't, it's off topic for you.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, well, fortunately, growing up, I was brought up in an Indian household, so we tend to, we always had a spiritual upbringing. Spirituality was the kind of the expectation. It was in our blood, so to speak. So, I'd wake up, I'll listen to my dad, listen to some Gurbani Shabads from the Guru Granth Sahib Ji, or listen to the Japji Sahib, or listen to Osho, and we would put, and then on the other side, we would go to the temple sometimes. Every Sunday we went to a satsang, so that was always there. But at the same time, there was this where I was getting kind of exposed to Eastern spirituality. I was Because I was born in England. Every day we went to school, there was an assembly and the Bible was taught. And so I had two conflicting ideas of what God was in my brain. I was like, what is going, so when I had my bit of a crisis, so like 15, 16, I was like, what is God? And what is this? Like, who's right? Is it the Bible God? Because it seems different to what I'm being taught here when I go to sung every week. So I then thought about it, and then for a few years it was on and off. And then when I hit like 20 years old, is when I had a bit of a crisis, and I was like, you know what? I don't believe in anything. I'm going to just have a clean slate and explore things. And in that time, I was exposed to more of Osho's teachings, even though my dad has been listening to him. But it was actually after I did by myself. I read up on his stuff, and then because the great thing that he did was he exposed you to other spiritual masters. So I got to see Ramana Maharishi and his teachings, or get exposed to it, and that triggered the, you could say, the beautiful diversity of Advaita Vedanta, and then ever since then I've been practicing meditating every day, thinking of that divinity, and yeah, until a couple of years ago, a year or so ago, when I started the podcast, I thought about sharing these messages, um, and actually more or less try to make sense of it more for myself rather than teaching anybody or telling anyone anything. It was more for me, because I feel I've learned more in this 1 year than anything. So, so yeah, that was the journey. So I did go through an atheist period. So I always say this, that I can definitely say that there is a formless consciousness, which is called Nirgun Brahman. I can accept that fully. But with the personal God or Saguna Brahman, I don't know. So I'm agnostic there. Instead of being atheist, I'm more agnostic. I don't know, and I'm open to it, type of thing.
Is there like anything changed for you majorly over 20 years where, like, for example, some of the topics you explored at the beginning and now it feels like it doesn't make sense anymore?
Oh, yeah, that is actually an epic question because, yes, so for me now, I'm so comfortable with the idea that Brahman or this pure consciousness has no attributes. Before, I was like, it has to have attributes. Even when we say it's, if we say, it's compassionate, it's caring, it's merciful, I had all these ideas and actually just break what recently has been amazing is that I've been able to break away from those ideas and be like, well, those can be the qualities, but they're not necessarily it. And being able to decipher that, and at the same time, even though I say there is only this, what I've done recently is integrate that into the world. So when I see the phenomenon of the world and the universe and the stars and the moon, the sun, everything, I'm able to see that the underlying essence is Brahman. And it's all a oneness, rather than seeing it as separate. Like in Vedanta, there can be the separation of relative reality and ultimate reality. I do follow that, but I see there's a oneness between the two, rather than a division or a separation.
And how do you've also looked into atheism, and how do you feel about that now?
That was required, but something I would say isn't needed. Like, it was required for me at the time to kind of break away. And I think, and actually, with my conversations with people on TikTok, I have been able to understand that tends to be the path that a lot of us are taking, where we grow up in the West, we get exposed to Eastern spirituality, we get confused, then we have to go through atheism to kind of get rid of any idea and notion, and then we go towards the Eastern spirituality and see it directly for what it is. So atheism was needed there, but now when you have people like myself and others who've gone through this process, can actually guide people from a younger age and say, you know what, you don't have to be an atheist. You can actually start dissolving those other ideas away and start embracing the real philosophy. And that is something I have found that today, like from my podcast, I am so surprised when I see my stats. A lot of young people under 35 are listening and watching the podcast, and I'm like, if they're getting engaged by it, then that means that they're okay with the Nirgun Brahman concept, and they don't need a personal God, and that's an interesting thing. So therefore, we don't have to entertain atheism, but I think for my generation, it was probably required, and we didn't have anyone above us who was able to. I feel we weren't able to relate to them fully. We could see them as role models in many other ways, but not on this particular point. So yeah, and the other problem that happens with atheism is that you can go down the rabbit hole of just denying everything and doubting everything. And I think I went through that period for probably a few months, and I was probably the most annoying person ever. So I think I would definitely feel that that's not required anymore, because there has to be a point where you have to accept an idea on the surface level to go deeper, to understand the idea. And then you can dismiss it. I think that needs to be done more, rather than just coming up with a question to sound smart straight after. I think it's that's required a bit more.
And thanks to content like yours, because now people can skip that whole journey and get straight to the what.
Yeah, I hope so.
And there is also irony in atheism. I feel like in a way, like it's also a belief system. If you're believing nothing exists, it's kind of like already making up your mind about something without exploring it.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And even then, so one thing that was a bit of a wake up call for me was when I saw a video of Richard Dawkins, and he said, and obviously, at the time, like, he was probably the one person we are more exposed to with atheism at that 10, 15 years ago. And the problem with him, well, not a problem, he said something was, there's a small chance there could be a God. And I was like, well, if there's a small chance and you can't guarantee it, then I don't think this is a viable solution. So, and it's not matching with my experience now, So that conflict is real. Did you ever go through this period of atheism?
I didn't go through atheism. I was more like agnostic. I left it at unknown. I don't know either side of it. I might as well keep an open mind.
Nice,
that was
nice.
more like my approach.
Oh, that's pretty cool too. And I think that's my approach now when I speak to younger people, that we leave it as an open question, but at the same time, show them the direct experience of that Nirgun Brahman, of that pure awareness, through meditation. So that can be done, but without making it a doctrine or another belief system, so to speak.
Yeah, and over the time, especially after doing these interviews, I've realized, like, I've observed that it's, for many people, it's hard to leave things as unknown. Like it seems like usually the direct response of the brain is to make conclusions or make a story. And so I feel like sometimes Advaita kind of topics, they can really point that out a lot more deeply, like how brain jumps to conclusions rather than staying in an observer mode.
Yeah, I am with you on that, because I have found that we are not comfortable with not knowing. And
Yes.
there is an incredible discomfort that people feel with just the open question. And I think one thing I have enjoyed about studying non-duality is the fact that I don't really need to have the answer straight away. I can actually rest for a bit. I can take a bit of time to just observe, and as you mentioned, and just watch what's going on, observe my mind, see how I process certain information, certain teachings, which I don't think you like. And this is even in the East. I mean, there are some spiritual organizations that are like, you must have faith. If you don't have faith, something bad's gonna happen, or you will not your question, you will not get the answers to your questions, things like that. And I think now, if you say that to a young person, they'll probably look at you and laugh, and that is because I could have been cool with that answer and thought, yeah, it's not true, but I'll just say, okay, that's fine. But a young person will question that now, and what I've also noticed, that if we don't leave things as an open question, sometimes if we don't give space to something, what can occur is confirmation bias. So we have to be very, very careful that we don't allow that to come in, because that can happen, especially with Advaita, especially with non-duality. It's a big thing. So we have to make sure that we don't do that.
Yeah, I'm on the same page with you. And also I've seen this in mainstream, like, practical life world, where we have this tendency to worship people who seem to appear as though they have all answers, versus like people who are honest about, like, I don't know, I'll figure it out. Kind of like people seem to see confident people who will like directly give answers as like intelligent people versus if someone appears they have doubts or they are honest about like I need to understand the deeper complexity of this. I don't have an answer right now. They'll be seen as not so confident and not intelligent. Hopefully that will change over time.
I hope so. It's kind of scary because I know exactly what you're talking about, and I have felt that is happening a lot more, where people just want to give a response or a reaction. I've done a few reaction videos on a particular mainstream teacher, and he has to give a response to everything, and is not, and then has even a video on saying it's okay to say I don't know. I'm like, the hypocrisy is real. It's right there in our face. And I think it's really important that, and I found this, that when I've been doing my Bhagavad Gita commentary, that I need to really understand the verse myself, not give someone else's interpretation, my interpretation through my experience, because that's why people are listening. They're not going to be listening. If I'm just going to quote Adi Shankaraji or someone else, that's their saying. I can use them as a backup source, as a footnote, but it shouldn't be the main comment. And one has to think about it. And sometimes, when there's a verse that is tough for me to understand, I've had to really think about it, spend what normally would take me an hour to write an episode script would take me 3 hours, because I've had to take time to think about it. And I think a lot of times when I do my live sessions as well on YouTube or on TikTok, if I don't know the answer, I will say, I don't know. And either I will find out, or it's not my territory, so I'm not going to go into it. So I do make that distinction because my time is limited. I can't talk about every topic under the sun like other mainstream teachers can. I can't.
That's really awesome. That's rare to find. Hopefully we are at the it seems like we are still at the very early stage of that, and maybe it will become more and more transparent over the time, because I see this, even like my background is in professional background is in tech world. I see that in tech world also, like people who appear to have all the answers are blindly worshipped versus like so it's there are many layers, like it's happening in different sectors where hopefully it will become more and more obvious.
Yes, and I would ask you this question, that when you've asked questions to all the teachers that you've spoken to, have you felt at a time that it would have been better if they just said, I don't know, to a question?
Yes, I've noticed that, and I'm still in a process of making sense of all these explorations, because I've said over the time, I've experienced that quite a few times where like it would have been better to leave that answer as unknown, because but that's very, very rare to find where someone does that, because in some cases I know that that's a conclusion made without a deeper exploration, and that may not be applicable. Maybe it's applicable to them, but it may not be true for some others out there. So to give like a set conclusion answer, it's interesting that and there are different layers to it. Like sometimes someone may do that unknowingly out of like it's their opinion, and that's true for them, so they don't really recognize that it's not true for everyone else. But sometimes it's also that it could also be out of authority, that I know better than most do. So there are different layers to it. But yeah, I have noticed that, and I'm slowly recognizing how to communicate that in a way where people have, like audience have to use their own discernment and sift out the gold off of like some it's, and sometimes as a speaker also it's hard to not mix your own personal opinion into what we are talking about. So so there are many different versions to it. Like sometimes it's like an innocent mixing of personal opinions. Yeah, I'm still figuring out how to communicate those kind of nuances.
Yes, it is tough to kind of sometimes notice them at the time, and then how to address it without coming across rude or or for them to not feel judged. It is a challenge, and I think tells you a lot about someone's personality, because they should be able to understand that the other person has to process the information. And at the end of the day, I can say my piece and I'll leave, but at the end of the day, your viewers and yourself will have to contemplate upon what I said, and there's a responsibility there, I think. That's my opinion, but I mean, but that's what I feel.
Yeah, I think that's very rare to find. It's and that's why I can understand when some people, when they have this realization, they refrain from sharing it publicly, because especially this topic, there it can be so easily misinterpreted, and it's very difficult topic to talk about without creating misunderstanding things. So I can understand like some people not wanting to share this publicly for a long time until they are able to process how to communicate.
That's true. Before I was probably ready to speak maybe 4 or 5 years ago, but it was only when I was poked by my wife and my brother-in-law that you need to share stuff. You need to share what you have. Have you not been seeing what's going on social media? And I'm like, and I was away from social media for quite some time. So, but there was the reluctance in me to share. There are a few things that I will refrain from saying. One is that I would never say that if I'm enlightened or not. I don't think that's anyone's business. And if I am, it's not going to make a difference to anybody. Because at the end of the day, each individual has to improve themselves, and they have to understand that they are in charge, not anybody else. And that's one harsh lesson I've learned, is that you cannot rely on somebody else for your spiritual attainment. It's purely your own effort. Yes, I'm not saying there's no grace or the teachings don't help here and there, but who's going to be practicing it? And if the guru has attained, or the teacher or the friend has attained, that doesn't mean you've attained or I've attained, So that's how I see it as well. Like there's certain things I will always refrain from. Like I get a lot of people turn around to me on these YouTube lives or TikTok. You're enlightened, or they'll call me Guruji, and I'm like, no, you can't. One, I'm not a guru at all. I'm a friend. One thing I've really liked about Rupert Spira was his approach to it, that see someone as a friend rather than this traditional teacher and disciple relationship, and it's actually more intimate, and I agree with him. And then there's the whole thing about whenever someone says I'm enlightened, like, oh, are you enlightened? I can categorically always say, no, I'm not. And then, but yeah, it might disappoint them, but it's okay.
I like your approach of live videos where you make it accessible for people to ask you questions directly. And it also seems like it's not like a master disciple kind of question answering. It's like a community discussion sort of vibe. So I really like that.
Thank you.
Approach. It makes it it takes away all the tension of like putting someone on pedestal.
Yes, but when that happens, and it's very easy to get there, like it's so subtle, that feeling of going onto the pedestal so easy. It's so inviting as well, and you have to watch your mind play the game, and then you're like, you know what? If I go on that pedestal, I'm going to be staying on that pedestal, and that's going to be disaster, because it'd be okay for the person on the pedestal, but the people who are worshipping you or looking up to you will always be looking for your guidance. They're like stuck with you, and you can't have that. There has to be a freedom. And I think one thing I really tell my friends in our community is that you've got to learn from everyone. There's something to learn from everyone. Approach every teacher with respect. There's a few teachers I fully adore, and I fully respect them, and call BS out when there's BS. Like, you have to be free enough to that. I say, if I say BS, you have to call me out. Like, it has to be a very open discussion if we are to move in a true spiritual sense, because I do believe that there is. I do wonder about the ancient times. You know, when there were little mini ashrams, and everyone would go to in India. They would say there'd be little hermitages, and you would go to a guru, and there'd only be a couple of you, maybe 5 or 6 of you. I do wonder what that was like. Whether that was as traditional as it is today, as people, there's someone on a pedestal and someone lower, or is it as we see on the pictures and paintings? They're all sat round in a circle, and to be honest, the only reason why we know that one person's a teacher is the beard and the hair. Otherwise, you wouldn't know. If they all had a long beard and the hair, we wouldn't know who the teacher is or the student.
I like that approach. And it does make it easier and more accessible.
Yeah, and people have to open up, and a few things that I do advise, and I think is really important in today's time, especially. And one thing I'm seeing that a lot of non-dual teachers aren't talking about or avoid is that I do say, if you're going to meditate with our community, or you're going to listen to my teachings on the podcast, then if you have any mental health issues, you've got to go for therapy. Like, it's a must. I don't think it's safe for one to meditate without that therapy being done at the same time, because I'm not trained to look at the mental health crisis. So if one has a mental health crisis, I don't know what to do with that. And there are professionals who are excellent at that. So I don't need to take their job. I can give it back to them and say, you know what, help those people. So I do advise people, if you have anxiety or depression, as much as meditation will help you and these teachings will help you, but it's very important to go through therapy. I think that's also the difference that I tend to have, and I've seen other teachers now, well, not now, but they've been adopting that for quite some time. I think Rupert, I attended one of his meetings, and he mentioned that there are a few therapists in his group, and that people can approach them. So there is that. There are teachers who are already doing that, which is really great to see.
And one more thing I noticed, you have spoken, you have done a lot of videos also on pseudo-wisdom. I would love to know if there was something that happened in your journey that inspired you to be more like point out this pseudo wisdom, because sometimes, like, a lot of people, especially this has happened in the traditional version, where people follow a certain guru and do everything that the guru is dictating. They don't realize when during that time that they are being used or abused, but later on, like, it hits them that was not right, and they kind of like it's a way for them to heal those experiences. I don't know if you had experienced where you got to see the disadvantages of pseudo wisdom, and if that's the reason you are outspoken about it.
I haven't. Fortunately, I've been very lucky that I've not experienced any bad gurus or anything like that. I've been very lucky in that sense. Or fortunately, my discernment has been strong to sense when there's been kind of when I can see red flags or not. But there are some teachers where I find they have gone from being genuine to being rather misleading afterwards, whether that's because they're looking for YouTube views or higher donations or some sort. But more so, I was kind of more disturbed with the growing number of YouTube non-dual teachers. There are a lot of young people, apparently, well, so I'm using their word now, where they would have awakening experiences, and then with that one experience, they thought they've attained everything. And I was like, I've had many awakening experiences, and I still don't feel comfortable. Like, what makes them think they're comfortable? What makes them think they can share this stuff prematurely? And the reason why I say prematurely, because I would watch their videos, listen to them, and they'll say there's nobody here, no liberation, no story, nothing here. There's what you're going through is not real. Discounting someone's relative experience. And I just thought it wasn't helpful in the long run. I think that's my thing was, I saw the long-term effect rather than the short-term. Yeah, someone may be influenced and they may have a little breakthrough with that teaching. I'm not discounting it completely. And what they're teaching is the end point of Advaita Vedanta. But there's a whole system before you get there. And I think I was kind of shocked that these people were going there without the system in place. Like, how does someone understand that they're not the body and mind? It's a process. Because, for example, if one of those people were punched in the face, I bet you they'll punch you back. I'm sure. I saw one video. It shocked me. And we did a live reaction to it. And one particular non-dual teacher was walking with somebody, and they were walking and they're about to they were like, just look straight, don't look left or right when you're walking on the road. I was like, you could get killed if you don't look left or right. And like, even though that was like something that's very material, very in the world, but even as a spiritual teaching, that's not good either, because you should look left or right so you don't get cheated or you don't get abused in any way. If you just look and say, oh, my guru's perfect or the teaching is perfect, that's all I need to look at, we're putting blinkers on, so we're not seeing the whole vast teaching for what it is. So that was one element. And the other element was the lack of bhakti, devotion. For me, devotion is very necessary. It's what makes the heart grow and expand, and brings about compassion and tolerance and acceptance and understanding that each individual is unique. So by me saying there's nobody here, nobody experiencing anything, there's no liberation, it was all an apparent happening, if I say all these things, these nice buzzwords, it's just too bland. It's not going to bring about a sense of community where you'll care for another person. Because imagine, say if someone's going through a nervous breakdown and you say, well, there's no you here, there's no nervous breakdown, there's no mind. That person going through the nervous breakdown is going to be thinking, what's going on here? So we have to think about things practically. And I feel that Advaita Vedanta does, especially from Swami Vivekananda, I would say, especially from the Ramakrishna mission, like Swami Sarvapriyananda, what they've done is brilliantly and beautifully integrated Advaita into the world. So it is compassionate and serving and humble, rather than this this kind of aura of authority, even though there's meant to be no student or no teacher, but there is still this authority that's played, this game of I know and you don't know, or you're in ignorance, that type of thing. So I hope I've answered the question.
Yes, it's I do understand what you're pointing to, and that's why it becomes tricky to talk about this subject, because some of the things that's being pointed to in those kind of topics, it's valid, but like it's paradoxical. Like that realization can happen instantly, and for that to happen, you don't have to be like perfect or resolved all your conditioning.
Exactly.
That can happen, but at the same time, like holding those opposite polarities, I feel like that's the paradox. Like that's the challenging part.
Yes, it's really important, Suma, that people understand that. You mentioned in your first sentence there, the most important point, that yes, you can get an instant realization, you'll get that awakening, but then the conditioning hasn't caught up, the mind hasn't caught up. And so we need to make sure the mind gets caught up with it. Otherwise, it's going to cause havoc later. Then we start seeing abuses happen. So that's why it's really important to not prematurely do anything. I know that right now it's like, I don't know if it's like with yoga, right? When they say, do 100 hours and you're a teacher, that type of thing. But we all know that yoga is literally a lifelong study. It's something you learn continuously, even after the 100 hours. I'm not saying that the courses aren't valid or anything. I'm not commenting on that. But a lot of people think that just by attending one or two non-dual meetings, they will suddenly have the spontaneous realization, and then suddenly there's only non-duality. I have found... have you interviewed Jeff Foster yet?
No, I haven't.
He's an interesting person because he was a non-dual teacher 10 or 15 years ago. I remember when I started getting into Advaita and non-duality, I remember seeing him a lot and seeing his transformation. Like the way he's just brought heart into his teachings has been inspiring to see. I know he's gone through some health issues, but I think the change happened prior to that. And seeing that was, and seeing him call out the things that he used to teach himself, that takes incredible courage. And I think I really admire him for that. It's not easy, but that's what needs to happen. We have to address any conditioning. I find it happen within myself. Despite how much I feel I've progressed, I still find my conditioning can catch up, and I have to go back to observing the mind and addressing why is it come up. What do I need to do to address it now to make sure it doesn't arise again? Or if it does arise again, how can I stop it before it does create any damage? Like, one does need to go through that process of checking and observing the mind. If one doesn't do that, doesn't check one's vasanas, one's tendencies from prior to awakening, we do run into a very dangerous territory. I have noticed that a lot of people realize that after posting so much YouTube videos and creating some damage themselves to other people, they then put their videos down because they stop believing in what they're talking about. Not everyone is as consistent or persistent as, say, Jim Newman or Tony Parsons, but a lot of them, they end up taking down their videos or deleting them. But what about the so many people that got inspired by you and now are left with nothing? Literally nothing, because that's what they teach. So that's a shame, where I feel there's responsibility. Just to add there, that was another reason why I joined the Association for Spiritual Integrity, because I wanted to make sure I was accountable for anything I say. I didn't want to take accountability away. And it's very easy to turn around and just say, well, I said it on my podcast. It was right in the moment. But actually, no, I have to think that if I said something, I need to correct it. And people should hold a standard. Like, they should look at me and say, you know what, this is what we expect from him. And if he doesn't do that, we should call him out. And he's being unethical. So I think that's really important, is to have that accountability. So I'm really glad that Rick Archer and with a few other people created that association, because it helps me, especially as I begin this journey of guiding other people through the podcast, and then and also what I expect from people who listen to me, that they need to have integrity too. And holding them accountable. So that's needed, I think.
Yeah, that's really nice to have. And we are lucky to have that, because in older days, I imagine before internet, imagine like not having these other avenues of information, and you're stuck with this only one person who has this strong dominance. It's like you... I can see like why in those days there were higher tendency to have cults and cult figures, because they had that power over information.
They did, and they had that influence to do so. But also, I do find that, especially a lot of teachers that came from the East to the West, they were not understood properly, and I think it was probably naive of some of the Eastern teachers as well. Like, they should have probably thought about whether to go to the West and teach their things, because not everyone is prepared to listen to you. Like I said, if I went through that conflict between the Western teachings and the Eastern, if you go to their territory and you start calling it wrong and everything, you're going to face backlash, and they'll find a little thing to go against you. So I think sometimes there was a bit of naivety also in the teachers. And then what happens with that, I have found, I don't know if I can say this, but, you can see if you want to keep it in, is that I find that a lot of people, Eastern teachers, especially from India, that if they got some following in the West, it added more clout to them. It added more respect to them. And they felt like, oh yeah, I'm so good because I have a few Western followers. And it brought some kind of... what it created was this ego. And again, it's the whole thing about conditioning, right? That was a conditioning that goes unaddressed and then creates so much havoc afterwards, because we get swept up by... the kind of the admiration of Western followers. I'm not saying that Westerners were wrong, actually. I'm actually saying they were right to do what they did, but the Eastern teachers should have been prepared for that, I think, and they weren't at the time, I think. And now they're probably more educated, I hope.
Yeah, I think it can be kind of... so you can get yourself into dangerous places, because even now to this day, like, I think belief system is something very core to people, so that topic is a bit too sensitive.
Yes, like previously I used to do TikTok lives, and I used to speak to people from different faiths, and my intention was to have a dialogue. But what ended up happening was someone's trying to convince me to believe in their belief system. And what I realized then was that you can't change anybody, even if what you're saying is making logical and rational sense. But for them, their faith is everything. And later on, I just ended up thinking, well, who am I to even challenge them? If they're not ready, if they're happy in their faith, let them be. Everyone has their own journey, and I think it's hard for people to get to that conclusion, because everyone wants to convince the other. And I'm like, it's okay. If someone doesn't want to learn, it's fine. But I've learned something from listening to them, so I can turn around and say I've gained something. But with them, yeah, it's tough for them to change their beliefs. And I think if we want to change anyone, it's through an open-minded approach and being compassionate towards them and understanding that they have their beliefs and we should let them be.
And what I love about YouTube is like we are able to now get into these topics without touching the religion topic at all.
Yes.
Yeah. And somehow we have kind of created this kind of like a lot of YouTubers out there where it's almost kind of like a new way of exploration without the clutches of religion.
Yes, yes. I have found that. And what's interesting is, I think what has happened is the evolution of religion, like especially with Hinduism, because that's the main thing I've been seeing. So I'm not saying it's not happened in other faiths. I can only talk about what I see. But like with Hinduism, what I've noticed, there is an evolution. Like people are now questioning, why do we have to do these rituals? Why? What's the purpose behind them? Why do I need to do murti puja, the worshipping of the symbols or the images? Why do I need to do that? What's the purpose? And these type of questions are now causing, they may cause worry for the priestly class, but for the actual seekers, these are a great, it's a great time, and they can get answers from great people on social, like you said, on YouTube. Excellent videos that have addressed so many questions that I had growing up, that I know other people had growing up, are now being addressed by young people who are intrigued to give this message, you know, and they give it in such exciting ways. Like, I find myself rather bland. I just speak in front of a camera. They do like amazing graphics and all the you know, images, and I think it's great. Like, and yeah, what's happening is what I think now people like ourselves and people who want to explore more deeper, we're saying either you evolve with us or you're gonna die without us. You know, you're gonna fizzle away, and we don't want you to fizzle away. We want to give you your importance. So, you know, the priestly class shouldn't feel like we want them to go. What we want is better answers. You know, there's not, by saying to someone that if you do this ritual, then you will get this, I don't think he's going to, nobody's going to buy it anymore. They're going to say, well, why? And then, why is there a price tag to it? You know, like people will always, now people will ask those questions. And I think that's great. I think, but more so is, and thankfully because of the channels like yourself where you're interviewing people, what people are getting exposed to is spirituality at its core. And they're able then to decipher and discern between what is religion and spirituality, and they get this clear distinction which wasn't probably available to them many years ago. Now they can see, you know, it was only by word of mouth they would come across another spiritual teacher or something, but now you can click on YouTube and the algorithm will help you. So, you know, there's that advantage. So I think now there is more exposure to the spiritual element, the inner element, than the outer performative religious ceremony that occurs, that's called practices.
Yeah, and now it's kind of like you have access to resources that maybe even a priestly class didn't have before. It's like practical, direct access to all these resources. It's insane, like how much has changed.
I absolutely agree with you. I tell people that your phone can now have the Gita, the Upanishads, the Brahma Sutras, all the non-duality texts, all in this phone. There's no reason why we have to even go out of our home to read them now. And they're translated in English. What more can we want? And there's not just one to choose from. There's many translations to choose from that you can find speaks to you. And I think that's amazing. You know, yeah, actually a few when I first started. So I did a poll on TikTok, and I said, do people want me to speak on the Upanishads or the Bhagavad Gita? If I had asked this question 10 years ago or 15 years ago, I guarantee you Bhagavad Gita will win by a landslide. But there was a time during this poll where I thought the Upanishads was going to win. And I was like, I didn't know that so many people know about the Upanishads now. Because when I spoke to my dad, and even he didn't know about the Upanishads. And he's like, we heard about the Gita, but never the Upanishads. And so when I saw that, at one time it was winning, but eventually, literally in the last hour, the Bhagavad Gita ended up winning. But it was so close that I've often said, when I saw the Upanishads winning, it brought tears to my eyes. Like, I was just like, this is amazing to see that now young people, because I knew the demographics, they're after it. And thankfully now, a year on, there's a lot more diversity on TikTok, especially in terms of age groups. So what I've really loved is interacting with even older people and seeing how they're encouraging us to read things like the Upanishads. And that's been really nice. So there's been I agree with you that the things that weren't available before are now available, and there's no excuse. Like, if anyone turns around to me and says, "Oh, I can't do it," I say, "Go away. You just say you don't want to do it." I'm more comfortable with you saying that than saying, it's not available. I can't read it.
And it's coming back kind of like in a new flavor, where now you can kind of explore this really old wisdom without all those restrictions and chains around them. Yes. It's a very beautiful thing to see, like kind of like blossoming slowly, where the old is slowly coming back, but with a new flavor.
Yes, absolutely. And with the ability to say that I don't agree with this particular verse or this particular stanza, like with the ability to even now say, I love the text, but there's certain things that are questionable, I think need to be taken out or don't need to be part of the canon today because it's not applicable. So I think now we even have that ability where we can even do that, which probably wouldn't have been entertained. You probably have to blindly follow it back in the day. But now you can challenge it and say, you know what, we don't want to consider that because that doesn't match with the experience of Brahman. What can people say then? They can't say anything. So that's the beauty.
Talking about Bhagavad Gita and Upanishad, what were some of the insights, if you had to kind of like summarize and pick only some very super key insights that made a huge impression on you? What would be those insights?
So for me, the major change... See, I've always seen the Bhagavad Gita as something that anybody can read and anybody can get great insights from in any aspect of life. But if you really want to be spiritual, the Upanishads is like the deep dive. So the Bhagavad Gita is the cream of the Upanishads. So it's definitely valuable. But it's like the headline or the shore. If you really want to dive deep into the ocean and get the pearls, it's in the Upanishads. So in the Upanishads, the ideas that you get exposed to, like there's a formless reality, you can be aware of it. The whole aspect of Maya being addressed. Those are the things that were never that are just insightful. Like, for example, I don't have to be in conflict with Maya. I can understand that Maya is as it is, and it's not an illusion. As we, at the end goal, it's an illusion. But while you're living in this body, it's real. And but when we are in the ultimate reality, we can see that it's unreal because it's always going through change. And I think with the Upanishads, there's a lot more internal focus, like Aham Brahmasmi, the idea that I can be God, but not just when I say I am God. I'm not talking about me, the body. I'm seeing that I am God is in everything. Everyone is saying this. That is everyone's reality, not just mine. You know, a lot of people, I see a lot of snarky people when they say Aham Brahmasmi, they say, oh, you're saying that you're God. That's what you're saying. But that's not what the rishis were saying. The rishis were saying that is the only experience for anybody when they say Aham Brahmasmi. So the idea is like that, Tattvamasi, you are that. You know, these Mahavakyas in the Upanishads really transform your life. Like, say you believe that you're an individual soul, then to be told that actually the individual soul is Brahman is transformative. And that takes you away from atheism. Because before, atheism is born actually from the idea of duality, in my opinion. Because we think we're separate to God, that we create this narrative that we can never get there. But the Upanishads gets rid of that. It tells you can be there. You are already there. You just have to realize it. You have to catch up to it. You have to understand it. And what the Upanishads do, which I really like, they use sometimes stories or dialogues that can help you to make it more relatable. I am always inspired by the Katha Upanishad, where the conversation between Yamraj and Nachiketa, when they have that conversation about death. And what I found intriguing when I first read it was when Yamraj says to him, I give you 3 wishes. And then basically, when it came to the 3rd time and he said, I want to know Brahman, I want to know this reality. And again, Yamraj tries to say, no, you don't want to know that. You know, I can't talk about this, giving all types of excuses. But when Yamraj says to Nachiketa that, you know, I will give you all the wealth of the world, all the possessions of the world. I will give you all the, you know, in there it says all the beautiful women and all this, and I'll give you all this, but do not ask me to answer this question. And then Nachiketa says, I don't even want that. I want the answer. That for me was like, wow. It's a simple thing, nothing amazing, but that made me realize that that's the amount of thirst we got to have, that if anything, even if we get billions of dollars, it should not come between us and the truth. And that was inspiring for me. And I was like, Nachiketa was a young kid, you know, he's probably, I don't know, probably 8 or 9 years old. And if he could do that, why can't I? With all my apparent knowledge and maturity, you know? So I think, and that's the beauty of the Upanishads as well, is it takes rid of the restriction that you think you have to be old to know God or to know reality, you know? You can be a young person, you can be a 5-year-old and know this reality. It's available to everybody. I think that is a few of the insights that really helped me, but it was mainly understanding the closeness of how close this reality was to me that I didn't even know. I think it opened the door to that, and I was able to then understand that there's only this ultimate reality. Everything is contained in this. Everything is just a reflection of this. And I'm going to treat it as a reflection of the divine. I'm not going to see it as, oh, it's Maya, I'm going to stay away from it. No, I'm going to actually embrace it fully. I'm going to see it fully, and I'm going to see it as divine. And I think the Upanishads allows you to do that. And obviously the Bhagavad Gita only further elaborates and evolves that teaching, because obviously Sri Krishna tells Arjuna to be part of life. Don't leave your home and leave your responsibilities. So I think that's really the few insights that I gained.
does Upanishad point to like how that there is further integration of that realization, and realization is only the beginning?
Yes, yes. So the thing is, in the Upanishads and even in the Bhagavad Gita, it's made very clear that the end goal is liberation, freedom from the idea that you are the body and mind. So that's the fundamental kind of end goal. So realization is just the kind of, you could say, the first step, that you just know that you are Brahman, you are the ultimate reality. But then what needs to happen is the integration point of view. So we have to then address all our conditioning, because yes, one can accept we are Brahman, we are pure consciousness, and that can be a very separate experience, and we can experience it fully. But then when I have to deal with day-to-day life, when I'm working, when I'm in my day job, when I'm dealing with family, with my friends, I need to find a way to integrate that in. And with the Upanishads, they give you, and the Bhagavad Gita, they give you great insights into how to be a good human being, a decent person, how to bring about love in your heart for others, how to think of other people, how to see everyone as the divine. So it does give you those insights that are really needed in the integration of this message, because like I mentioned before, if we don't do that, then what will happen is we will become more, we will start, I think a superior complex gets built, instead of seeing the samdrishti, the same vision for everybody. So the Upanishads gives you, well, what the Upanishads do very smart, is very smart. They tell you basically, well, this is what Brahman is and this is what you are, so this is the exact things you need to have. So for example, if I'm not compassionate, then I can't turn around and say, well, I've realized, because I should have this quality in me, and so yeah, so those are the few things. It does give you good steps to integrate this message further into your life, so you can get to that freedom point of view. And that is enlightenment, when you're completely free from the notions that you are the body and mind. And but yeah, anybody can read the Upanishads and get their first glimpse, and that's enough to start the journey.
Yeah, I think I haven't looked into it, but some of those texts seem to go a lot more deeper than just the realization, because I feel like, and this is something I'm exploring on my own, and I'm leaving it open to however it wants to unfold. But what I've seen is like with realization, there is a lot more unfolding integration that happens, where, for example, like if there is a veil through which you were not able to see clearly before, those veils slowly start lifting, and that integration takes time, because and that can take years for it to kind of like lift off, and it's a beautiful process, where if someone had a veil of being a positive person, they may miss seeing all these red flags, which was all in front of them. But when you start seeing those things clearly, it's that insight of like everything is right in front of you. It goes to a whole new level, because now you are really seeing things as they are, and they are not like covered by your own different veils.
Yes, that's really, really cool. I like the veil, and I like that analogy. That's really cool. Yeah, that's really nice. And that does explain it really well. Like, I love the fact that you mentioned positivity. Like, someone can have that veil of positivity and not see those red flags. Yeah, that's absolutely true. Like, for example, a lot of people ask me, well, if I'm humble, does that mean I'm a doormat and that people can just take advantage of me? I'm like, no, that's not what humility is. Humility is knowing who you are and understanding what you are, and at times, and it's one, being respectful to others. But if you think that someone is taking advantage of you, you call it out. You don't just sit there and say, you know, I'm a servant of you or whatever, or you know, you say, no, I'm not going to do this. I don't care who you are. So, you know, you're right. That veil slowly gets removed, and you're right. These teachings can help us get there. It does further, and I would say the Upanishads, like the Ashtavakra Gita, are more texts that you should read after a glimpse of the divine or realization. I think those are the texts that are required afterwards rather than prior. Bhagavad Gita, I think, is accessible to everybody, but even then, there's a lot of the teachings, even in the Bhagavad Gita, where there have been great movements made from it where they do not understand. Their founders never understood the deep messages of the Gita. So that can fall under the trap as well, because, you know, like Sri Krishna, he's obviously read the Upanishads, he's obviously studied it, hence he says certain things that are directly linked to the Upanishads. So if to really understand the Gita, you kind of then have to go back and read the Upanishads and then come back to read the Gita. So you see it from a new vision, rather than the old self that was prior to realization.
Yeah, I think those are the kind of nuances of integration that I think it still hasn't been explored in usually a lot of like content that's available, it's more around realization, but this further territory of integration, sometimes it gets also dismissed when you try to talk about it, that it's more concepts or it's just more of your imagination. That's why I've refrained from talking about that, because that exploration, it becomes like different for different, like it's up to, like there's so much to explore. So
yes. Even with realization, so this is the interesting thing, because when you read the Upanishads, you see the integrated rishis talk, and you listen to them. This is a good test that people should do. Look at their teachings, and then look at some of these people on YouTube and wherever on social media, and see, are they matching? Are they somehow aligned? If not, then one needs to start discerning between whether the YouTube teacher is wrong or maybe the Upanishads. Like, which one is right? One needs to use a discernment, or not right, I shouldn't say that, but what will help me more right now in my journey? So that's something that's required, because I think it's impossible to stay in that notion of realization all the time. I don't think the greatest of swamis are able to do it in terms of monks. I think there is a time, I'm not saying that they are always in awareness, they're always in that ultimate reality, but they'll be performing actions in front of you as if they were a normal human being, and that there's no difference. And I think a lot of people then misunderstand that. You know, they think, oh, they expect someone to be like high and mighty or whatever. So with realization, people need to understand how normal it is afterwards. It's not, you know, people expect fireworks sometimes. It may not even be, mine wasn't a fireworks. Mine was just mine was rather slow, and it was rather progressive. Despite having direct teachings, it was still progressive and slow. I didn't have that. I don't know what it means to, you know. So I know I'd love to know what you think. You know, when people say that they came across a teaching for the first time ever, and you know, they suddenly realized that they were this reality or this truth. How do you feel like when people say that? Like when I hear that, I'm like, I don't know if I believe you, because that didn't happen to me. But I've heard of people who've gone through that. So I'm like, okay, it could be valid. But then my test becomes afterwards. I see how they interact with people. afterwards and see if it matches, type of thing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I see what you mean. It becomes tricky to talk about that because then I can see that can happen. And if because if I try to say like it otherwise ends up like it becomes tricky to put it in words, because then that becomes like a concept. Like if you say that can't happen, it has to be this way, and that turns into a concept. Like this is how you. So that's the dilemma I have when I try to address that, because everything is
possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's very tricky to talk about that topic. Like but it's also possible that it's not fully realized, and maybe it was just an experience. So that's also possible.
Yeah, I think that's what I mean. Like, so say it's valid that they have that instant realization, but I think it's the afterwards and their approach, I think, that that I see as whether it's really happened or not. But also I find that, and I think my main point with that was that I think people need to understand that even if you have that instant realization, that it doesn't mean that you're truly like you haven't attained mukti yet. That doesn't mean that you've attained liberation. Like, for example, even a liberated being will still have to address their own karma. Like they say that even Ramana Maharishi and Sri Ramakrishna, they had cancer. They did nothing wrong in the present life, but they still got cancer from some previous birth. Say if we entertain that notion. And so yeah, I think for me what I'm trying to get to is, or trying to understand, is when people say that they've had this instant realization, that they don't fall under the trap of thinking that everything is going to be rosy now, that there is going to be things that are going to come up that may not make any sense in the present moment, because we have, or in the present life, because we haven't done certain things to deserve or what we see as bad things. But yeah, like, but there is an obvious element of the past that plays in.
Yeah, it's very tricky to talk about that. And another caveat is if we say something like no, that's not realization, this like it may create, like if someone is new, it may create more like like workload in their mind, that I have to do these things to get there, and not seeing that they are already there. So that's the caveat. It's very hard to describe it.
You are right, because what you're saying is, and I get it, like basically when we say you are already this, that's true from the ultimate point of view, whether realized or not realized, right? But what we have to understand is that each has their own journey to acclimatize themselves and align themselves to that understanding, to that realization that they are everything that is. They are this Nirgun Brahman. So yeah, no, I'm with you on that. Like, I get that. I was more talking about the integrating that happens afterwards. So even if you have the instant realization, that how does one integrate it into, like, that's the biggest test, I think, afterwards. Like, for example, Ramana Maharishi sat in a cave for 15 years or however long it was, you know, in order to get used to it, because he's the only one I can see who had the instant realization that I know about, you know, in terms of what's recorded in history.
Yeah, it's the integration, like, and that can happen to that's not that unreachable, because there's no gap between you and realization. It's just there. But the thing is, like, that integration part, I feel like there is that topic is not explored, at least on the content level, where it's still very hard, rare to find content around that. But hopefully that will, more and more people will figure out a way to communicate that. And maybe we are
Yes.
still at the beginning phases.
Yes, and I do have hope that even people who've been sharing this, what I call jokingly somewhat pseudo non-duality, I think they will eventually, in order to remain relevant and approachable, I think they will have to go and approach this integrative aspect to, because I think from what I've seen of the meetings, so it's quite obvious the teachers know what they're talking about. They know their topic. They know what they're saying. And what I find when people ask them questions, I think it's a two-way thing. The teacher needs to understand that the person is not on the same wavelength. So how can you get the person onto the same wavelength? Number one. Two, the student also has to understand where the teacher is going to be addressing it from. So, for example, a lot of the non-duality teachers, they're only going to be talking from the ultimate point of view, and they're not going to stray away from that, which is respectable. You know, I think that's cool, but I find that it's not helpful for a beginner on the journey, and a lot of people that probably go to them are beginners. And that's why I think one thing I wanted to add on is that, yes, although one will study the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita, it is very important to study a lot of Adi Shankaraji's works, Adi Shankaracharya, because he gave a lot of foundational texts to kind of address that you're not the body or mind. And he's given a whole process of doing that. And I think a lot of the pseudo non-dual teachers, they don't talk about this. They don't talk about the foundation to how they got to the realization. Like, for example, a lot of them did a lot of spiritual practice before they got there. And they don't talk about that. They never mention it. There's one, well, I call him the godfather of this movement of Neo-Advaita. He doesn't talk about that he was with Osho. He doesn't address it at all. And I think if you told people that that's what you did and you got there, I think it would be greater, actually, because now I know you've got a journey and you worked on it. You know, I shouldn't have to research it to know that. So I think, so for me, I think it's really important to have that foundation set. For example, say if you don't want to say that you've gone through a whole journey, say that that's the approach you want to do, and you want to say, I got to this realization, and you want to start from that point. Even from there, I think it's important to talk about the foundations, so that any newcomer, any beginner can really understand what you're talking about. And instead of them being told that this is what it is and hammering it into them, you're leading them there. And actually, they will find fulfillment in the journey. So what will happen is, instead of them feeling empty afterwards, they will feel fulfilled. So I think, and that's what I have found, that when, because some people who've messaged me, they did go to some of these teachers, and they ended up telling me they felt empty. They felt empty, and they felt rather, they didn't feel fulfilled. Didn't feel complete. So I think, and I realized it was because the foundation isn't given when I listen to their talks and stuff. And like I said, what they're saying is fine, but it's to a very, like, their message is not for the masses, in my opinion. It's for a very small group of people that can get there. You know, you have to be an expert to get to where they're talking about, in my opinion. Like, I'm putting them, actually, I don't mean to put them on a pedestal, but I am. Like, they're on that level. And Yeah, so yeah, I hope that makes sense.
Yes, yeah, I see kind of both sides. There's a reverse side to that, where if someone is practicing over and over for years, doing all these rituals and reading everything for decades, and still that realization has not clicked for them, seeing this other flip side, maybe um, may I don't want to use the word
No,
help,
yeah,
but it's kind of like to each their own. There's no one
yes,
side that's all kind of, because some people, for some people who have spent a lot of time in studying and meditating, um, and it has not clicked yet. For them, it may be refreshing to see from this other angle, which um, and it may click. So there are many different variations.
yeah, and actually, Sumi, you actually do point to a very important thing that I do want to mention. I think this comes down to the relationship between the guru and disciple and how intimate it is. Normally, what I find that those people that do a lot of practice and end up not getting anywhere is because they don't have any personal interaction with the teacher. So the teacher's not actually there to help them with their nuances and their intricacies. And, you know, a human being is so unique and that's not addressed. So I've mentioned this a few times. I think the age of the guru of the masses is gone. It can't be done. Like you can have a lot of fans on YouTube, but you're not helping anybody. You can give them practices. Like a lot of these gurus do give people practices as well, but how can you really get someone from doing those particular practices to say, well, this is not working for you now. Now you need to do this, or now you need to do that. So I think there needs to be. I think that's what it comes down to. Maybe it's the teacher and disciple relationship has become very blurry, and needs to be clear again.
Yeah, I see what you mean now, because that can happen even in that direct message kind of settings where someone is listening to these talks for years to come, and
Yes.
still not get it. So that can happen even with that, because in a way that is also a practice where
Yes.
you're every
Yes.
day you're listening to a lot of these talks, that there's nothing, but uh, it's still not like that realization has not occurred. So it's, yeah, it's I can see your point about like when you work with someone closely versus just having like because that version is available in both, where in tradition settings as well as the modern setting where you don't really know this person who is sharing all this talks. And but if you personally, like, you're close to someone, they may know a lot more, like they may have insights about what could like what are some of the things that may resonate with you that could make that happen.
Yes, and that's very much needed, I think. Um, I have attended a few of Rupert Spira's webinars, and I always find it amazing when he knows people by first name and then asks a certain question about their personal life, um, or you know, he'll ask how they're feeling, um, or the slight smile I see when he recognizes people when he scans the gallery view type of thing on Zoom. I have noticed he's the one teacher I've seen do it. I'm sure there are others as well, but I think that kind of human approach is very much needed, where we have to understand. Yeah, where even with the direct teachers, they have to understand that everyone is not going to get it straight away. The best thing is to find out how we can get them there, and that needs to be the number one priority than just being a loudspeaker, so to speak. It's better to be a softer voice and guide than just be a loudspeaker in both traditional and in the direct teachings.
Thank you for like clarifying that point. That was quite insightful to point that out, because I can see that making or help them see something new than in just like, like you're in a crowd of hundreds of people and you're just listening to this talk.
Yeah, yeah, like it's and what happens then is by accident sometimes the teacher then is seen as this magnificent, because they are charismatic. A lot of the non-dual teachers that I disagree with on my reactions, I cannot dismiss the charisma. It's obviously there. They have a presence. It's very strong. Yeah, and what needs to happen is, what ends up happening is people fall in love with the personality that's teaching them, rather than even falling in love with themselves and understanding that they are the truth themselves, and that and the other person is trying to tell you a message, but that becomes less important than admiring the person or the personality. And I see that a lot in traditional and in direct circles, but sometimes the other thing that I found with some of the comments when I've done reactions is how they all sound the same. Like literally word to word. And that has been jarring for me. I think it's been a bit like the individuality's lost, and I think there's so much beauty in the individual, in the individual, in the collective. There needs to be more of that, where you should have your own voice. Like, for example, the way you explain things is so beautiful, and the way another teacher expresses things is so beautiful. Like, everyone should be able to see the different nuances in each person, but then see a collective together. A collective of teachers or students where they don't all sound the same or say the same stuff, but they are different and unique, because I think that can be done.
Thank you for sharing that, because I feel like you clarified a very nuanced kind of like, this is such a tricky topic, and it gets even trickier to try to make someone else see that. But I feel like you were able to communicate that a lot more clearly, and you brought out some new way of looking at this, which is not, I've not come across about this conversation yet, where the importance of working one-on-one with a person, directly with the teacher, or sometimes people don't like calling themselves teachers, but even as a friend.
Yes.
Friend.
Yes, even as a friend. Like, for example, even in friendships, there's only a certain amount of friends you can have. We can't be friends with everybody. It's impossible. But to have that deep friendship, it can only be with an intimate number. And I think it's interesting because, like, I've seen so much. So I've seen two sides, Suma. Like, I've seen the guru of the masses, and I've seen how positive that can be. I've seen the sense of community it can bring, but what I saw was missing was the real spiritual growth, because it was then more about being in the community, or expressing love for the teacher, for the spiritual master, than actually improving, and working on ourselves and being honest with our spirituality and being authentic with it. You know, how many of us are able to say, oh yeah, I haven't got there? You know, like even on YouTube, like to say, I haven't got there, I don't know the answers. It's so difficult for people to do. But that is the reality. Like, for example, I'm very comfortable to say I'm not there. And I'm not going to mislead anyone to say that I am there, you know? And, or say if I am there, what am I doing to help somebody to get there? Can someone say outright that, yeah, you know, so and so has helped me to get from where I was before to where I needed to be? You know? And that's my number one rule, is that we are going to be honest and authentic with our where we are. And until we understand who we are, only then will we say or declare anything. But it's just, I think sometimes that's missing a lot in today's day and time, really.
But your channel and your content is bringing that out. So I see a lot of potential in what you're doing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I mean, that's the whole aim, is that we have a community that is just open to being normal. That, you know, for me, somewhere, it's really frustrating when people think spirituality is like this otherworldly thing. And it's totally like normal. Like, you know, someone thinks that if you're spiritual, all you do is like meditate and read scriptures. No, I also go, I said it in my podcast episode last week, I think, that, or it's this week that's coming out, that, last week. If you want to go to the pub, go to the pub. If you want to go out for drinks with your friend, go out for drinks. Like, be yourself. There's more value in someone seeing that spirituality is not some aloof thing, but something that's in life and enjoying life and being absolutely normal, having a sense of humor, you know, and the little things like that. Or, you know, there has to be a childlike quality that appears from being spiritual, I think. And I think sometimes we think it's much better to have a holier than thou attitude than just being completely normal. And I think for me, I would say spirituality, just the only change it brings is your vision. And because your vision's changed, your approach to life changes, and you make certain choices that you wouldn't have made before.
I definitely resonate with that. I think it can change your vision big time. It's so insane how much it can transform you.
Yes, I wanted to ask you, so what changes have you seen in yourself since you started doing this work, and with your spiritual practice? Like, how do you find you've changed and developed? Or
I started this as more like a spontaneous, fun kind of a thing. Like, I was not looking for something. I had so much interest and passion for these topics. I thought I might as well start this YouTube channel, as it would be a fun way to connect with more people and talk to them. I didn't have like any like this, that I have to get something out of this. It was just for fun. But I think, and I don't have like a practice. Like, for me, these conversations are my practice, but it has definitely transformed me a lot. Like the example that I gave about the veil of positivity, that applies to me so much personally, because a few years ago, I used to be like that. Like, I used to brush off things. Like, I just want to focus on something positive. And I used to put off things which were already like visible. And that those kind of things, I feel like it just kind of dissolved over time, because I'm just having the vision to see things as they are. And it's the constant transformation, because that clarity like although realization may happen, I feel like that clarity takes a long time to kind of clear up, that vision to clear up. And in my case, like for me, dreams have been a big way to clear up those kind of things, like some was. And it's a very beautiful way to clear your vision, because some of the dreams, they show up like stories, but and they seem like they are this imaginary stories, but they give you some insights at such a deep level that it changes you in your waking state. That there's now that you have dreamt about those things, that some of the mistakes you made in your dreams, you won't be doing them in your real life. And I feel like that's such a awesome, brilliant way to learn something, because in dreams, like you don't have that many consequences if you make mistakes.
Yeah, true.
I feel like it didn't have, those things didn't happen in real life, but I didn't know that's possible to do that in dreams, where you see all these different scenarios play out in dream, but your real life personality is changed.
Yes.
I didn't know that potential exists, where that's something I kind of came across in some of these traditional texts, where they talk about how your dream state is not separate from your waking state. And that line starts blurring, where your dream state is more like access to your subconsciousness, and that awareness, like it's the same thread that flows through waking, dreaming, sleep.
Deep sleep, yeah.
So it's kind of like interesting, where through experiences, like I'm trying to get to researching these topics, but for sure, like some of the things I used to do a few years ago, I can't see myself doing them again. Like for me, the positivity was the big thing, because although we kind of see that as a good quality to have, it can, especially in my dreams, it showed me quite a few dreams, like if I continue on that path, I can get myself in some dangerous situation. Like one dream I had where I was talking to this person on the street, and I had this gut instinct that there's something off about this person. But I just again did this positive thing. No, I'll just try to see something good about him. He'll be fine. And I invite this person over at my home. And as I was talking to him, I realized he has a gun. And it was like I had this instant, like my regret in my, like it was like such a scary dream. Like I instantly regretted, and I had this very like in your gut you can feel this, like someone
gut-wrenching. Yeah,
it was gut-wrenching. And ultimately in that dream he does kill me. And in that dream, and it was such a vivid dream, I could remember while I was dying that I wish I had just listened to my instinct, like how but when I woke up, and I had a couple of dreams like that, where it showed me the downside of positivity, like how what kind of dangerous situations you can land in if you don't just shake yourself up and see what's in front of you. But those dreams, that has changed me so much. Like without the bad consequences of in real life, I learned that in my dream that this is something I need to let go of, and just let go of the story of a good person.
Yeah, that's really, I really loved, you mentioned this a few times, and it's such a great thing. It's actually seeing reality for what it is.
Yes, without those labels of good or bad, because even that label of good can actually be quite harmful.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I'm with you on that completely, because I was speaking to a friend yesterday. I said, he was feeling kind of deep regret over a mistake, and I said, look, at the end of the day, whether it's a mistake or not, we don't know, because what could be a mistake today may be an actual blessing for you later on, or what was good today may become bad tomorrow. Like, we have to always understand that every action we do, one, is a gray area. It's always gray, because it can go either way, because time changes, people change, society evolves, culture evolves. Then this, the whole thing of, at the time, as you mentioned, is seeing reality as it is. So at the time when I see something, when I'm going through something, am I looking at it through my past experiences and my judgment of somebody, and is that being played, or am I actually seeing the person for who they are? Like, sometimes we can even misjudge a good person and say, oh, they're like this, they're like that, they're annoying, or stuff like that. So sometimes I do agree with you that spirituality gets rid of those false narratives that are created, so you can see what is presented in front of you without any, sometimes without putting any words to it. Like where there's that silent just witnessing. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. And that's what I feel like, listening very clearly to that voice without all these distortion. It takes time.
Yes.
And when you are able to listen to that carefully, it seems like the information is already there in front of you. It's that's my hunch, that things are already available and in front of you. You want to clear up your vision to be able to see that.
Yes, you're very right. And actually, this I have. I think if someone is able to do that, to see reality as it is without those distortions, they will be able to see the ultimate reality, that pure awareness, a lot. They will come head on with it. It's like something that's unavoidable, because it's that silent presence that's constantly there, watching everything. It was there when the distortions were there, and it's there when the distortions are not there. And that is the most beautiful thing. Like, I always tell people, do you know how close this reality is? I said it's so close that it's between your eyeball and your eyelid. So you can feel the presence of this at all times. And I said it's not a minute space either. It's not small, it's infinite. So at the same time, you can feel the vastness of this reality rather than just the directness. Because sometimes we can feel it right here, but not everywhere. And I think the real Advaita teaching is when it goes from here and you are able to expand it everywhere. So wherever you go, you're literally, as I said today in my meditation session to people, you are walking in the awareness as awareness. Wherever you look, there is awareness. And that can only happen if, as you mentioned, the big step is seeing reality as it is, getting rid of those labels. I think that's a big step that people need to take. And you're doing it beautifully through dreams. I mean, that's amazing. It's the first time I've ever heard that. Like, I've heard about it before, but not the way you've explained it. I really love how the way you explained it. You're basically, all the layers are being peeled away with you.
Yes.
And what's happening is, so it's interesting. So in Yog Vashisht, there are some crazy concepts in there about dreams, and it's very much. Have you watched the film Inception?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a lot of the things that are mentioned in Inception about dreams is mentioned in Yog Vashisht. It's so uncanny, like it's so similar. And but what I really like is that there is that oneness of being, that even though people like to divide, there's the waking person, there's a sleeping person in dreaming state, and then there's the dreaming person, then the deep sleep person. But what we see is actually there is that basically the person is the brain, the mind is the same one person through those three states, on the relative level, and then on the ultimate level, obviously everyone is that Nirgun Brahman, they're that pure awareness. So what I really liked in your examples is how you've linked that they're all, that basically what happens in the dream will have an impact on the waking state. So I really like that. I really love how you've done that. And it's a bit like Inception. I bet you've noticed this, where you're in the middle of a dream, you're never at the beginning. And
Yes.
when I heard that, I was like, what? And then when I read it in Yog Vashisht, I was like, how did they know this like thousands of years ago? I just saw it in the movie yesterday. It's amazing how that happens.
Yeah, and I was not even aware that even in my imagination, I didn't think that possibility exists, that this kind of like clearing up of awareness can happen in dream state. And also another thing I've realized because of these dreams is that if you're able to kind of see something clearly, even at your subconscious level, like that's in waking state, it's like piece of cake if you get
Yes, because you're dealing with the subconscious, where it's actually very subtle in the waking state.
Yeah.
So you're right, because what then becomes, so yeah, okay, so what it is what's subtle in the waking state is actually gross in the dream world, and then what's gross in the waking state is subtle in the dream state. Like, I get what you mean. Like, there's this good interplay going on. Yeah, I am with you on that. I think that's really true.
It feels like a lot more preliminary level than, like, waking state seems like a more product of what happens in your subconscious.
Yes. And actually, isn't it interesting that in order to even improve in the waking state, we have to go through meditation, which is kind of a bit like sleep. It's not totally sleep, but it's a bit like sleep, where you have to address the intricacies of the mind.
Yeah.
When you use meditation as observing the mind, you know, like a lot of people, they just think it's about getting rid of thoughts, but I see it as the opposite. I'm like, no, maybe you need to look at the thought and actually look at it for what it is, rather than saying, oh, I shouldn't be thinking, oh, why am I having thoughts? And yeah, I think that's so interesting. I never thought of dreams in that way before. You've opened my eyes to this.
Yeah, I was not aware that that's possible. And another thing dreams that showed me was, in dreams it seems easier to go into, like, kind of like push into the unmanifested, where you see things that don't even exist in physical realm, even like conceptually. Like, it's kind of like pushing the boundary of imagination.
Yes.
And it's, I find it amazing, like how like there's so much to explore in your own awareness, like dream,
yes,
both not just waking state but also dream state, and pushing that boundary. It's I didn't, like, that was like beyond my imagination. And I also leave it open that it's just an exploration. I don't like, I'm not like rigid about like this is how it is, or like these are different states, or like, it's just it's an interesting exploration, and I leave it open at that. Like, what I found it interesting was, when you're exploring those things, there's not a lot of content available to try to understand or make sense of that. Like, and that's why I found it interesting. Like, some of these older texts, they talk about all these different states of awareness. So that's I found that very interesting. Like, and this was like, some of these things were written like thousands of years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I was just thinking about how I was reflecting upon, even when I'm dreaming, I'm actually aware of the dream. Like, it's not, So, like it can really be a spiritual practice while you're dreaming, because you are always the observer of a dream, even though you're the it's like, it's so crazy. You're the participant. You're obviously in the action of the dream, but at the same time you're watching it. It's so messed
Yeah.
up. And it's so like, it really messes with your mind. But the funny thing is, if you can do it in your dream, you could do it in your waking state too. But you can
Mhm.
do, where you can be a participant of life and then yet remain watching of it. Ah, yeah, that's incredible. That's incredible.
Yeah, and Advaita has this interesting way of explaining where um, to awake in a dream there is nothing really separate, like you are just in a dream, like there is no separate world, like it's happening in the mind, it's just
Yes.
happening within the content of mind. But when but that's something that's the waker is conscious about, but when you're inside the dream you're not aware about that. So and that's how people, like some gurus, talk about the experience of waking up, why that separation drops, like to a waker's mind it's all the content of mind. But if someone is in the dream asleep, it all appears separate, like there is a separate world. There are
Yes.
all these separate objects.
Yes. Yes. It's interesting because a lot of people, they also practice this as a thing where they see the whole thing as a lila, the whole world as a lila, the waking state. And that's an interesting thing as well, because when we do that, it allows us to perform our day-to-day activities with the way we should, but then also remain detached to the actions we do. If we truly practice it, some people would just say it and they say it as a good soundbite and that's it. But actually practicing it is pretty cool. Like, try it out. It's really cool. Like when you, and actually you become a bit more playful with life, because like you deliberately do things which you wouldn't do. Like you're very spontaneous. You're like, okay, normally I would react in this way, but let me actually react this way now and see what happens there. So you're able to do that, but again, in the same time as you're doing that, remain as the observer, like simultaneously. So two things should be happening. You know, it's really incredible.
Yeah, I've refrained from talking about dreams because before, like, I used to be I didn't know what to expect, like I may get dismissed, or I may, like, some may say that I'm just imagining things on my own, but now I'm more and more comfortable that even if it's just my imagination, I'm comfortable with that, like it's okay, like I'll just let it be,
Good.
being able to like share
Good,
that.
good. Yeah. Otherwise, yeah, otherwise you should know. There's no story here. There's nobody here. What are you doing? But jokes aside, I think, yeah, I I've always felt there's some tr- truth to when people talk about dream interpretation. But as long as you know it's an interpretation, that's good. Like as long as you don't get too invested in the dream. Like, for
Yeah.
example, instead of reliving the dream continuously, where it gets blurred, the whole thing with Raja Janak when he wakes up and the king, and he's like, he dreamt that he was a beggar and his whole kingdom had kind of collapsed. And when he woke up, he was like, is this real or was that real? Like, am I a king as I am? Is that real, or is me as the beggar and the suffering king, is that real in the dream? So, and what happens there, for me, what I understood from that story was that person got too invested in the dream, that he kept replaying it instead of saying, that was just a dream. Let me see how I can adapt it to my life and move on. Obviously, a story's they say in Hindi, they add in a bit of masala, a bit of spice to to the story, so it's more impactful, which is fine. I think you should do that as well. it gets people interested. But I have seen some people, especially on TikTok, where they talk about dreams and they'll keep repeating it. And I'm like, it's all right, man. Like, we get the picture. You're dreaming, you're interpreting, but don't keep reliving it. Go back to reality and see how you can learn, like you're doing very beautifully, learning how to adapt it into your day-to-day life and making yourself stronger spiritually, which is the end goal. Because I have felt a lot of people. Isn't it interesting? You know, you talked about positivity, the toxic positivity. Isn't it interesting how a lot of people now who were proponents of this positive vibes only culture are being called out for not being so positive or not so kind? Isn't that interesting? Because what you repress ends up finding other ways to express itself.
Yeah.
And
it's very fascinating, like to observe all those layers.
Yes. And you see, like I remember when I used to entertain this, I'll admit, I used to be toxic. I used to have toxic positivity too, always see things as positive. And then eventually I was like, this is tiring me out. How long am I going to keep doing this? Like, not everything is positive. Not everything is great. Like, a lot of people say, don't complain. You should always be grateful for what you have. I'm like, no. If something is crap, say it's crap and deal with it. Instead of saying, oh, I'm going to be, like, for example, like, why I don't like that teaching, you know, as much as I now would say there's a toxic gratitude culture happening where we have to be grateful for everything. Like, I'm sorry, but if someone is in poverty, they should not be grateful for their poverty. You know, they should say this is wrong and do something about it. And not saying that they should go out and get a job. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that the system needs to change. Why should they be in poverty? You know? And one shouldn't be thankful to some God that, oh, this has happened to me. Or this is what God wanted. You know, that type of toxicity is not helpful in spirituality, actually. It creates a very subtle ego, which then becomes very hard to break away from. Because then it's the whole thing about the image that you built. Oh, that person's very positive. That person's always grateful. You know, that becomes the persona and the image.
And that's the distortion because of which you are not able to see things clearly.
Yes. So I've always said to people, you gotta be real about a situation. Like for example, I've mentioned this a lot in my podcast that if somebody like when I've read the Gita, I have felt more called to do something to make sure changes happen to, like, for example, if someone is going through poverty or is suffering, then that's also me suffering because they're also a part of me and my experience of the shared being. You know, Rupert Spiro talks about the shared being. That is such a compassionate way to, I'm sure you can use any concept in a toxic way. I'm more than positive that that can be done. But the shared being concept is that if I can relate to somebody and say, you know what, that's also me. I wouldn't like that. So why should anyone else go through that? It makes you change dramatically, you know? And if spirituality doesn't make that change in you, I don't know. It just doesn't feel... it's something that Osho said. And many of the Indian teachers talk about this, that spirituality is like... they use the word juice. It's the juice of life. If it's not adding to your life like that, it's, I don't know. Otherwise it's very bland if it's all about meditation and getting to a thoughtless state. You know what I mean? So I'll give a personal example. My older brother passed away, and there's a time when you just very stoic about death. Like you're kind of like, it's happened. You don't cry as much at the moment. You're still processing it in your mind. And I received a text message from my guru at the time, and he just said one line, and I broke down like in tears. He just said, "I understand the pain of losing a loved one." Just that one sentence, right? Of him just being able to understand exactly how I felt. And that's when I broke down. Like, thankfully, my dad was there to like kind of hold me in that time, because I probably would have fell on the floor. But like, even in time, both in grief and happiness, when there's someone that can understand you completely as one and the same, you enhance that other person's life so much. Like I felt in that moment, my relationship with my guru went to another level of closeness, of friendship. And yeah, like there's so much value when you can actually fully be at one with someone's experience. So for example, say someone is going through a crisis, just being able to listen to them and really take in what they say and be with them in their pain will probably be more helpful to them than just being like, or dismissing it as, this is not, this is all in your mind. Like, they don't need to hear that. They know it's all in the mind at first. Everyone knows it intuitively, but they want to just be heard. And if you're able to do that for someone, that's also so important. That's also spiritual work. A lot of people might not think it is, but it is. So yeah, I think that relatability is so important in spirituality. It just adds another dimension, I would say.
Yeah, I think it takes a lot of work to get there.
Yes, it does. And again, like I constantly tell my friends this, that my guru showed me a lot of things of how to be as a person. If I take away all the spiritual things about my guru, what I loved about him was he was the best human being you could ever come across. Like, he was actually really nice. And that's rare to say about anybody. Like, I could genuinely say, yeah, he was a decent human being. Like, even my friends who had met him, when he passed away, they said it felt like the world had lost something. It was back in 2016. So, and that's the one thing that I said to my friends was, that when someone shows you that you can be a good human being, it becomes a lot easier for you then to say it's possible. But if you don't have those examples, it's going to be impossible. You're going to think it's unrealistic. It's impractical. Like, for example, a lot of people, like when I listened to your interview with Swami Sarvapriyanandaji, like, the reason why he can totally say that, you can live that type of life is because he's seen people who's done it. So he can say, yeah, I can do it. Now, when I see Swami Sarvapriyanandaji, I'll say, I can experience that because I know he's done it. We learn from each other. And that's why it's so important to be a good, why it's so important to have that integrity and that honesty and authenticity. It all plays a big part in spirituality. But yeah, like, I think that's so important.
Yeah, you see a practical example in front of you, and it looks doable than just having it in an imagination.
Yes. So say you could read the Upanishads or the Bhagavad Gita, and it can just be stories or teachings. But when you see the teachings come to life, it's a whole different story, Then the scripture becomes living, rather than before it's just a book with text in. I'll be very honest, that's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, I do relate to the importance of bringing it to life. That definitely is the best way to learn something. Yes.
And people should be able to see it in your day-to-day life, like even at work, in your friendships, even people who are not spiritual. They should be able to say, you know what, I can trust this person because I know what they're like. I know they're not going to judge me. I know they're going to be there for me. I know that they will listen to me. Things like that. Or I can go to that person because I know they will get that thing done because they're honest. Or when that person enters the room, I feel relaxed. It's so important that, I have felt this, even though I've criticized this teacher in the past, but Sadhguru, when he's in the room, there is a presence in the room. There's a change in the atmosphere when he comes in, and I've tried to stay like, I'm one person where I'm like, am I just feeling what other people are feeling, or is it me? Like I try not to get people's feeling, because people are in awe around you, and they're all like, oh, Sadhguru's here, and so I try to like kind of think, is this what I'm experiencing it, or is it my neighbor experiencing this? It's very subtle, but we have to analyze that in ourselves. So when I've seen him twice. The second time it wasn't as positive, but the first time was his first exposure to, I would say, this was in London, and this was his first big event type of thing. So, and I felt the presence of him. It filled the room, The second time I felt it was more, the showman was there. Not Sadhguru, not the person I met initially. But it's true. But despite the showman being there, you could feel there was a sense of spiritual aura there, And I think it's so important that when you enter a room, people should be like, I want to be around this person. Because I know, this is a question I would ask you. If a spiritual person came in the room, how would you feel if they made you feel uneasy? Like, would you want to learn from them?
I think that in general, if someone is spiritual or not, in general, if someone doesn't make me feel comfortable, I do. I'm hesitant about those kind of things, because usually it has turned out that that's not a good sign.
Yes. So that's what I mean. Like, we get this intuition within us to say, I don't know if I can trust this person completely, or I don't know if I can vibe with this person. And one should trust their vibes, internal vibes, when they say stay away from someone. But the spiritual person should be that whenever they enter the room, you smile, you're happy, you're joyful. And they show you that part of you which sometimes we repress because of our problems in life, or the conflicts we're going through, the tragedies of life. That person should be able to go beyond that and enter a place within us where we don't mind being happy, or releasing all that tension and happiness, or that depression or anxiety. That person should be able to invoke that within us. And that's what I feel like. I want to work on myself so much that I'm able to represent that, like that for me has been my biggest thing recently, is how to work on that and get to that point where, when people see you, they smile. When people see you, they want to learn from you, instead of passing you by. And that can only happen when you actually internalize and practice the teachings. Only then. And that's the You could say it's the most annoying thing about it because you wish there was a shortcut. But I I love the struggle. I really love the struggle of being a spiritual person. I really love it. I love the fact that I fail so many times before I succeed. I love that. I don't know if a lot of people feel that way. Like I don't beat myself up. Like if I fail, I'm like, okay, let me just try again. I failed once, let me try again. You know. But yeah, I love the struggle.
It is a long journey, and hopefully we'll see more and more examples that you are pointing out, because it does make a difference when you actually see that in real life.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. A lot of people, some people ask this question, how can we make spirituality practical? And I'm like, even if I give you practical steps, if you're not going to do it, what difference is it going to make? So instead of asking, sometimes I tell people, instead of just asking how to make spirituality practical, how about just practice spirituality? You can feel, there's nobody in this world that can turn around and say they cannot observe their thoughts. Nobody. Like, unless obviously they're going through some issues, but most people will be able to observe their mind. Okay, if you can observe your mind, then now, as J. Krishnamurti would say, observe the observer. Now, once you start observing the observer, then you come to that witness consciousness. So I think that's really important to do, where we're able to just do those simple things instead of something complex. Just observe the mind, watch the mind, and try to not judge the mind. And that is one. Or people will say to me, I don't have time I don't have time to be spiritual. Then I'll say, well, there is no place where there is no divinity. There is no place where there is no holiness, or everywhere is filled with the grace of this one. This or this what is everywhere. It's all pervading. So I'm like, if you say you have no time, you definitely have time to brush your teeth in the morning. What tells me that you can't be spiritual there? Why can't you practice meditation there? When you're showering, when you're on the toilet seat, whatever. Like, there's no excuse for anybody to say they don't have 5 minutes to meditate, because or to observe their mind. And I say this, like, when someone tells me that, I'm like, I don't believe you. Or 2 minutes before you fall asleep, you can observe your mind and get into that, and observe or be aware of awareness. One can do that. It's accessible everywhere at any time.
That's a very beautiful message, Rahul. Is there anything you'd like to share today for the listeners?
What I would say to anybody that's on the spiritual journey is, one, remain very honest about where you are on this journey. Analyze your progress. Be sincere. It's very important to be sincere and genuine. And then most of all, find a practice, find somebody that can really help you intimately and move you forward in your spiritual journey. If you are still at the same place where you were, I'll be very kind and say 1 year. If you're at the same place, something needs to change, and one has to be honest. Thankfully, in today's day and age, there are so many great teachers out there that we can learn from. So many that you've interviewed, Suma, so many of them. there is no excuse for anybody to move to a different teacher that can help them. One shouldn't feel compelled or restricted to one teacher. You don't have to. Explore whatever makes you grow. Allow yourself to grow. Just take that step, take that plunge. And if you're with that spiritual teacher that can help you, take the plunge. Don't even think twice. Take the leap and go for it, and reach realization, because it's available for everybody. But with that, a caveat that don't be so naive that they take advantage of you. Whenever the slight feeling of someone taking advantage of you comes in, step away. And that's something I will say. And just end with, if you come across non-duality, make sure you understand the foundations first, and then whichever teacher you go to, I am sure it's going to be fruitful. But for first, it's important to definitely get the foundation.
That's an awesome message. Okay. And I'm going to link your YouTube channel link in the description of this video. Is that the best way to reach out to you?
I do have a website, www.thebeardedmystic.com, and that has both my videos and to my YouTube, and also anyone. Sometimes people like listening to things without seeing one's face, so they can utilize the podcast streaming apps. And if anyone is has been inspired and likes to support it, then there's Patreon as well. I always emphasize Patreon instead of donations, because with Patreon you're able to get something back. So I think that's always important, that some people should, and that's where I like to actually build my community, on Patreon. So like, if they want personal, although I do offer one-on-one meetings on the side, but if you support it on Patreon, it's a lot better because you get a lot more in return. I think that's, a guru should, or a teacher or a friend should always be at service to you, rather than the disciple always serving the friend or the teacher, or the person they're inspired from.
That makes sense. And I also want to thank the listeners. Thank you for making through this whole conversation. But
true.
If you found this useful, please comment and leave your feedback. Thank you.
Yeah, and call me out if I said anything wrong. I'm more than happy to be maybe I need to improve, so then I'm more than happy for that too.